So we have everybody entered right now. So I think we should get started. We're at 3:02. So let me just take a quick second here to introduce Sarah Hudson and Jill Johnson. They're going to be our presenters here to be able to address everything we want to know about vaccines. Or maybe that's too high expectation, but I love you guys are shaking your head and smiling. So that's great. So please, Sarah and Jill, take it away. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm Sarah Hudson. I'm with Deschutes County Health Services. My role is as a public health management analyst and really specifically focused on health communication. And Jill, I'll leave
Sure.
you.
Yeah, Jill Johnson. I'm a supervisor for communicable disease programs at the health department. Also a nurse, and am currently deployed to the incident management team for Deschutes County for COVID-19 vaccine distribution and clinics.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So really just kind of want to level set here a second and kind of the goal of today's presentation. So really just want to make sure the group feels comfortable that you have accurate and timely information to make an informed decision for those of you who have not decided whether you'll get vaccinated yet. And that it's totally normal to have questions. There's just a whole range of attitudes around the vaccines that we're seeing. Some people are over the moon. Some people are a little bit unsure, might have questions about, oh, it feels rushed, or were the vaccines tested in people like me? You know, there's a whole range of things that might be influencing your attitudes or your intent to get vaccinated. So we really just want to make sure that you have the information you need to make a decision that feels comfortable for you. And I really want to thank the group for submitting a lot of great questions. So really everything that Jill and I are going to be presenting today, our goal is to answer a question that was submitted by the group. So we hope to do that today. So the promise of COVID vaccines, it's a really excited stage that we're entering. And vaccines are playing this really critical role in us really returning to normalcy, ending the pandemic, and it really brings that promise. But something that we like to say is vaccines don't save lives, vaccination saves lives. So it really is the decision to decide to get vaccinated that will help bring the control of the spread of the virus here. So with everyone that gets vaccinated, each person brings us one step closer to that kind of herd immunity or community immunity we need to control the spread of the virus. And in Deschutes County, we're really shooting for 80% of eligible adults to get vaccinated. So that's really the goal locally. And really want to make the case that getting vaccinated is a safer choice than relying on getting COVID or kind of getting natural immunity. Because I do hear some questions about, well, if I've had COVID, or why can't we just get COVID and get over it? And there's some reasons why that approach is really not the best way. So natural immunity to COVID, we're seeing is only really lasting 3 to 9 months, which is why even if you've had COVID, it's recommended that you still get the vaccine. Also, because there's just such a serious risk of disease and death and a lot of complications and those long haul impacts, it's really not the route we want to go to rely on getting COVID because the risk is so much greater than just getting vaccinated. And while we're still kind of calculating what that death rate is for COVID, we do have evidence that suggests it's about 10 times higher than that it is for the flu. So it's just very dangerous to get it. And if you can avoid getting it, we'd really like to choose vaccination instead. And even if you yourself don't get sick, you risk those who are around you. So your loved ones, your family and friends could be at high risk. So for all those reasons, we say that vaccination is a much safer choice than relying on kind of this natural immunity. So I know a question came through, are vaccines necessary? Hopefully this provides some evidence as to why we think it really is kind of the best tool we have at this point to end the pandemic. So just to make a finer point on it here, what are the benefits of vaccination? So as I mentioned just before, it's really helps you build that immunity without having to get sick and having that risk of getting seriously ill. Um, it is the vaccines that are available, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, which Jill will go into more detail in just a moment, are incredibly effective at preventing you from getting sick, from getting severely ill or dying, and therefore protecting those around you. So some people can't get vaccinated, children, those who might have certain allergies or a severe risk of anaphylaxis would not be able to get vaccinated. So you're kind of helping protect those people around you. And we know that masks and social distancing alone aren't enough to end this. So really the vaccine presents a really big tool in our toolkit for getting this under control. And it can help set an example for others. So I think we have the benefit of living in a pretty relatively small, tight-knit community where when people kind of see what the experience is of others, they might feel more emboldened to choose it for themselves. So we can have a lot of influence for those around us as well. So with that, I will give the floor to Jill, who's going to go over some vaccine basics.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about herd immunity or community immunity for a moment. That for those of you that aren't familiar with it, or maybe this is just a review, but basically the idea is that the more of us that are vaccinated or immune to a disease, the less chance it has for spreading among our community. And so in this graphic, it's showing the people on the blue on the left are not immunized or not immune, so they haven't had a vaccine or the disease. And then the red figures are the ill folks. And then when you kind of move to the right, it shows that, you know, the vaccine, especially, or the organism, the virus, especially if it's a respiratory organism, spreads really easily among the community, right? And so most people get it. And then if you go to the next one, Sarah, it's just showing that the yellow figures are immune. So either they've had a vaccine or they've had the disease. There's just less chance for it to spread, right? When there's kind of a buffer around the sick people, there's less chance for the organism to spread. And so you can see then when you go to the right side of the graphic, it's just showing, you know, one more person became ill, but this high level of immunity prevented further spread. One of the things I wanted to mention about this is, like Sarah said, for COVID, we need about 80%, certainly upwards of 70% of the community to be immune so that we can prevent spread in the community. For many viruses, the level is high, and it really depends on how the virus is spread among the community. So of course, airborne or illnesses where people have respiratory droplets that spray and other people inhale and things like that, they spread more easily. And so we need a higher level of immunity to keep that virus from spreading. There was a question, I think, Sarah, connected with herd immunity.
Oh yeah, so I think the question was, we don't talk about herd immunity for protection against influenza or other common viral infections. So why is it discussed so much with COVID was one of the questions.
Yeah, so I think that we talk about it with all of the vaccine preventable diseases. And as I mentioned, it varies by disease on how easily it spreads. But for COVID, of course, being a global pandemic and it being so widespread, and really wanting to get a handle and a control on this virus, we talk about it more, especially now that there's a vaccine available and we can actually do something about it in a real way, have a real impact. We're certainly talking about herd immunity more. I think another point to make about that is that the sooner we can put this virus at bay, the less chance we're going to have for mutations and changes in the virus that the vaccines may not be able to address as well. And so the sooner we can make that happen, the less chance we have for variations that we don't have as good of vaccine for yet. Let's go to the next one. So the vaccines that are currently under emergency use authorization are the Pfizer, BioNTech, and the Moderna vaccines. Both are messenger RNA vaccines. Both require 2 doses. The Pfizer, the 21 days apart is ideal and recommended. Moderna, 28 days apart. And then both are extremely effective. And so these vaccines are as effective as like the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella, the varicella vaccine, which are our most effective childhood vaccines. And so that is really exciting. What if I can't get the second dose 21 days after for the Pfizer or 28 for the Moderna after the first dose? So that's a great question. We don't want to give it, I just want to mention, we don't want to give it closer together because you won't get as good of immune response. It's okay to go longer. The recommendation is right for that 21 days or the 28, and we want everybody to be as protected as soon as possible. And the only way to do that is to get both doses. It takes about 2 weeks for after a dose to achieve that full immunity that the vaccine is providing to you. So, of course, the sooner we can get those doses done and the 2 weeks pass and you have the 95% immunity, the better. However, the recommendations are we shouldn't go past 42 days from the first dose. However, if a person is unable to get it within that time frame, anytime they can get that second dose is okay. But just keeping in mind, the closer you can be to this 21 and 28 day recommendation, the better. So who can get these vaccines? The emergency use authorization for Pfizer is for 16 and older. The Moderna for 18 and older. There are currently trials going on for the 12 to 17 age group. And then after that, I think it's the 5 to 11-year-old age group. The reason that they're kind of phasing in the trials is that for the younger kids, a smaller dose may be needed. And so they're really monitoring for side effects and efficacy to determine dosing. But promising so far. But it does look like it'll be about a year until children, till there will be an emergency use or outright licensing for children. What is in the COVID vaccine? So there's this messenger RNA, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. There's some fats, potassium, organic compounds. There is no live or dead virus in the vaccine, which is different than other vaccines. So it's very interesting, this technology. They do not contain pork products, eggs, latex, or chemicals. Other COVID-19 vaccines, this Johnson & Johnson is actually coming up for consideration by the FDA on this Friday. It's a one-shot vaccine, and it is made with a dead or inactivated virus. So it's a little bit different. And it looks very promising. It's very exciting that it's one shot. There's some populations that, of course, that makes a lot of sense for, ones that may not be able to come back for a second appointment. So that's exciting. The Novavax vaccine is also in late stage trials. That one, it works similarly having to do with the spike proteins on as the messenger RNA, but is made a little bit differently. So people who have, this key facts. So people who've already got sick with the COVID-19 may still benefit from getting vaccinated. So that is absolutely the recommendation. We know that there is some short-term benefit or immunity after COVID-19 infection, probably about 90 days. But it is recommended that once a person with COVID-19 gets past their isolation period and their symptoms are resolving, that they should get a COVID-19 vaccination. COVID-19 vaccines cannot give you COVID-19, do not interact with your DNA. That's correct. It does not enter the nucleus of the cell, so it does not interact with genetic material at all. There is no virus in this vaccine, so it cannot give you COVID-19. COVID-19 vaccines will not cause you to test positive on COVID-19 viral tests. So that is correct. So antigen test, because there is no COVID organism in the vaccine, that you will not test positive for COVID on the antigen test. However, you could on an antibody test, because this vaccine does elicit an immune response and you do build antibody. And so you could test positive on a COVID-19 antibody test.
And Jill, one question we received from the group was, what if I contract the virus between the first and second dose?
Yeah, and so the recommendation there is the same, that once the isolation period is over, you're 24 hours without fever and other symptoms are resolving, that you do go ahead and stay on track the best you can for that second dose. Okay, so this is an area, as with COVID, I can't really believe it's been just about a year since our first case in Deschutes County. A lot has happened in that last year. We had, there has been so much to learn, and we've come a long way that we're already vaccinating for this virus. It's incredible. But there is still learning to be done. And so these are some of the things where, there's still trials, there's still information being collected about different populations. There is not a contraindication to receive the vaccine if you're pregnant or trying to conceive or breastfeeding. There is evidence that receiving the COVID vaccine, if you're breastfeeding, does not pose any risk to the infant. Of course, pregnant women who do contract COVID-19 vaccine are at risk for usually post delivery symptoms and things of like early labor, things like that. But it's something that women should consult with their physician to determine whether the vaccine is appropriate for them. Same with cancer and autoimmune diseases. Those are not contraindications. You can absolutely get the vaccine. It's just important to note that, there just hasn't been a lot of study around these yet. And it's important to be in consultation with your physician on those. But we've definitely been vaccinating a lot of people with cancer and immune conditions. Medications are generally not a contraindication. However, Some, like we've had, like people that maybe have a case of shingles, and so they're receiving an antiviral, and our health officer has said, let's wait a little bit until they're off the antiviral to receive those. Allergies, not so much. If there's been an allergic reaction to the vaccine in the past, or any vaccine, especially an immediate or severe reaction, that could be a reason to not get the vaccine, or it could be a reason that we just monitor extra afterwards. Other vaccines, they have to space 2 weeks between the COVID vaccine and another vaccine. So if you received the shingles vaccine 10 days ago, you would not be eligible for the COVID vaccine for 4 more days. So the messenger RNA vaccines are have actually been around for quite a while, and they've not so much the vaccines, but the mRNA technology. It's been used for more than 10 years in cancer. In cancer patients, the cancer research has used mRNA to trigger the immune system to target specific cancer cells. And so there's also been other vaccines that have been studied, like flu and Zika and rabies, different vaccines. What's interesting about mRNA vaccines is that it introduces instructions for our bodies to build proteins. And so in the case of COVID vaccine, it has spike proteins around the edges. And so what the mRNA, or the messaging part, teaches our bodies to make this spike-like protein that attaches to the outside of the dendritic, or some of the helper immune cells. And so then our bodies build this antibody against this spike protein that's attached to the outside of the cell, and then it gets rid of the instruction material. And then when if the body is introduced to COVID virus, and has these, it will have this spike protein on it, then our bodies recognize that, and our antibodies attack the virus. So it's really interesting in that, typical vaccines introduce that dead or inactivated virus. Our bodies build antibody against it. But this one, it teaches our bodies to make this kind of, clandestine protein that looks like COVID, right? And so then our bodies will attack it because it looks foreign. So very interesting, very effective, and it could be used for multiple vaccines in the future for sure.
Great, thank you, Jill. I'm just going to go and talk about vaccine distribution for a moment. So as you all might know, demand is a bit greater than supply right now. So vaccine supply is limited, but it will increase in the weeks and the months to come. And our guesses are based on the Moderna and Pfizer availability. So with the Johnson & Johnson coming out, that can help kind of increase the timeline as well. So OHA is just kind of giving us guidelines based on Moderna and Pfizer availability. But this is a chart of how Oregon Health Authority is determining its prioritization of who gets vaccinated first, and kind of the sequencing of that. So I just want to reiterate that eventually everyone who wants to get a vaccine will be able to get one. But for now, because it is limited, really trying to focus on who is at greatest risk for COVID, and trying to prioritize that way. What are some of these vulnerable groups? So it started with those frontline healthcare providers. And then as of this week, we are now vaccinating those who are 70 and older. So it's really exciting. Kind of week by week, the eligibility opens up and we get to reach more people. And so as it is discussed, we're in that kind of phase 1A, groups 1 through 4, phase 1B, groups 1 through 4. So we're expanding eligibility each week. And then also those who have been able to be eligible before based on occupation, so educators, healthcare providers can still continue to sign up to get vaccinated, even though we're moving on to new groups. So if you have not decided yet, or you think you'd like to and like to sign up, that is still an option that's available to you. And the way that we're doing things locally is that we're really concentrating a lot of our energy at this mass vaccine clinic at the Deschutes County Fair and Expo Center, because it's kind of this high throughput area. So we're just able to vaccinate a lot of people very efficiently in a fairly centrally located place. So I think we can vaccinate upwards of a couple thousand people a day as supply permits through that site. We're also allocating some doses to some smaller healthcare providers who might be in touch with their patients about scheduling vaccines as well. Again, it would follow that Oregon Health Authority sequencing. So it's not that just because they're a patient, they can get it. They still have to qualify by age or profession. And then also there's kind of this federal retail pharmacy program. So I think it's Albertson Safeway, Costco, and Health Mart are also offering limited availability. They're getting some federal supplies, vaccines as well. So those are kind of the current mechanisms. We anticipate as there's more supply that will change. You'll be more likely to be able to get it through your provider, things like that. But for now, a lot of that energy, like I said, is going to that mass vaccine clinic at Deschutes County Fair and Expo Center. So the way that individuals can make appointments is through the St. Charles website, through the link that is shown there. You can just go to St. Charles as well. And when there are appointments available, you're able to schedule. You would fill out an attestation form that say that you are eligible based on the criteria that we are in that moment. We're also trying to really encourage folks to sign up through this vaccine interest forum hosted by Deschutes County. And that way you can say, I'm interested in receiving the vaccine and I'd like to know when I'm eligible. And then you'll get information pushed out to you as soon as we have it. And you'll get, okay, now we're opening it up for those 65 and older. You know, we'll tell you kind of where we're at in the process. And that's a really good way to just kind of get direct information, because supply is kind of limited right now. Those appointments can fill up quickly. So it's just a nice way to stay in the know and really up to date in these kind of next few weeks while we're still waiting for more supply. Jill, is there anything else you would add to that?
I was just thinking that the other pieces, just kind of pop-up clinics or outreach clinics to locations where we've identified gaps. So like, for instance, we did a clinic at the senior center in La Pine last Friday for the elderly that aren't able to travel all the way to the fairgrounds. We're also going to be doing, pop-up clinics for different populations as needed. So to try to fill the gap, but really that fairgrounds is, like Sarah mentioned, such a high volume of throughput that it makes a lot of sense for us to continue that model, and especially as we get more consistent allocations of doses going forward.
Great, thank you, Jill. And just kind of a speed round of some questions that we received from the group, kind of around vaccine administration. So is there a risk the state will run out of vaccine before I receive my second dose? No, that's not something you have to be worried about. We factor in second doses into our planning. So that is not a concern. There was kind of a question around, if I get, as best as I understood it, kind of if I'm vaccinated, is there a provision for my spouse to also get vaccinated? Really just want to highlight here that because supply is limited, we're really doing it based on eligibility as determined by Oregon Health Authority. So it would need to be based on occupation or age or some other criteria that would make you eligible. So you wouldn't just be eligible because someone in your family got vaccinated. We got a question about, is the state tracking who has received the COVID vaccine? Yes, we have a state immunization registry where we keep track of that. How much does the vaccine cost? It is completely free. You cannot be charge to receive the COVID vaccine. If you do have insurance, we recommend bringing your insurance card, especially if you're going to a private provider, because they might try to, your provider might try to recoup some of the cost for administration, but you yourself would not get charged, nor do you need to have insurance to get vaccinated. So it is free. Just want to underline that. And then also a really good question about, will I be required to provide proof of vaccination to travel? We're not sure yet. That's not the case right now. It's not being done yet, but it remains to be seen if maybe some countries would ask for folks to show their vaccinations, COVID vaccination to enter or cross borders. I know there's some talk of it, but it's not been done. And I also just want to reiterate that vaccination is not required. So I've received questions elsewhere about people being concerned about being forced to get vaccinated. Is it required? And it's not. You know, we'd like for people to just choose to get it if you feel comfortable making that decision, but it is not going to be something that is forced upon you. All right, now I'm going to switch it back to Jill.
Okay, so side effects. Yes, side effects are normal, common, and expected. Generally, with the first dose, not as many side effects. We're seeing just some soreness similar to a flu vaccination. You know, certainly there have been the person here and there that has more side effects after the first vaccine, but they're generally very mild for the first vaccine. And yes, it's a sign of the immune system working, building those antibodies, mounting a response. So it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. It could include fever, headache, muscle aches. I think pain at the injection site is the most common, and that's about 92% of people. So, you know, you can pretty much just expect that you're going to be sore for a day or two. Fatigue is also one that is pretty common. About 70% of people experience some fatigue. And I have heard that where people say they, you know, went to bed a little early that night or something, just feeling tired. Headache, about 65% of people. Muscle pain, 51.5%. So kind of some achiness. And then they're, typically very short-lived, and then more common after the second dose. So those chills and body aches and things like that, people may experience that for a day or two after the second dose. But some people are not feeling anything, so it's hard to say. Can I take medicines like acetaminophen or ibuprofen post-vaccination if I have side effects? So it is okay post-vaccination. It is not recommended pre-vaccination, as it can, there's potential that it could interfere with the antibody response if you take it prior to the vaccination. But certainly if you develop post-vaccination side effects, acetaminophen or ibuprofen is fine. And, you know, I've heard people that do have, especially after the second dose, where they just take a dose of Tylenol before bed, and then, you know, they do fine and feel much better the next day. So I think definitely do that if that, you know, if you don't want to have much side effect after the second one. If I don't have side effects, does that mean the vaccine's not working? That's a great question. It does not mean that. There actually a good proportion of the trial folks receiving the vaccine did not have side effects. And, you know, we ended up with this almost 95% efficacy. So that does not mean that the vaccine is not working. More to learn, yes. As I mentioned earlier, it's just ongoing learning happening around COVID and COVID vaccine. We don't know how long protection will last yet. It's just too early to know. Definitely the studies will continue around this. It could be that we need a booster at some point. It could be that, I've heard there could be a shot where there's the flu and the COVID vaccine that we receive annually if protection is short lasted. It's just too early to know. Can vaccinated people still spread COVID-19? There is some question and studies going on to look at this regarding carriers or the people that could harbor COVID-19 vaccine in their mucosa of their nasal passages, and that they, can they pass that to someone even if they've been vaccinated themselves and they're not sick? That does happen with some other viruses, and so that's being looked at. We just don't know yet. Will changes to the virus mean new vaccines are needed? Good question. Definitely the vaccines that are in use right now were designed around early versions of the virus. And so scientists believe that these vaccines will be effective against variants, but it might not be as efficacious as for the original version. So there could be modifications made to the vaccines as we go forward. Maybe something similar to the flu vaccines where they're reformulated each fall to match the circulating strains.
All right, so I'm gonna jump in and talk about what to expect before, during, and after vaccination. So before, learning about COVID vaccines, check mark, we're all doing that now, so good job. And then see if it's recommended for you. So once you do feel comfortable taking that step, when you do show up for your appointment, you'll get a fact sheet that tells you a little bit more about whichever vaccine that you're receiving, the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine, and get specific information about that. You'll receive your vaccination card. And it's really important that you bring that back to your second appointment so that the clinician can fill it out and mark that you got both doses. And afterwards, like Jill was saying, expect some side effects. Maybe just plan for it. Don't make any plans to do anything crazy, like go on a 15-mile run afterward or things like that. Right after the appointment, you'll wait for 15 minutes just to make sure that you're not experiencing any adverse reactions. The whole process takes about 30 to 45 minutes for the most part. We also encourage people to enroll in vSafe. It's a really kind of easy smartphone-based app that you can just report your symptoms and what you're experiencing, and it sends you reminders about when you're coming up for your second dose. I guess I'm a nerd, but I thought it was kind of fun to like, how are you feeling? And like fill it out every day. But it's nice to be able to provide that information because we're really relying on people to provide that data and information. So we keep learning more about the vaccines and the side effects and just more data to help our knowledge. And again, really important to continue safety measures to protect yourself and others, of continuing to wear a mask and social distance. So when will you be protected by the vaccine? I think Jill covered this earlier, but it's 2 doses, 3 to 4 weeks apart for the ones that we currently have, the Moderna and the Pfizer. And so it's really, really important to come back for that second dose for that maximum protection. And then we're really seeing that maximum protection and immunity really occurs 2 weeks after the second dose. And we'll know more as time passes. So I think that was kind of a theme of what Jill was mentioning as well. We're still learning some things as we go of how long immunity will last or how often we might need to be getting our COVID vaccines, if it will be like the flu vaccine where you have to get it on a semi-regular basis. And again, just really highlighting the importance of continuing those prevention measures. And it's important because While the vaccines are incredibly effective, they're not 100%. So pretty darn close, but not 100%. So it's important to keep up those measures. And we're still researching whether people who have been vaccinated can still transmit the virus. So we know you yourself will not get sick. Early evidence gives us reason to be hopeful that transmission is low, but we don't know. We're still figuring it out. That wasn't an outcome of the clinical trials. The outcome was figuring out if you yourself would get sick or with COVID. So that is being studied, and we'll know more as time goes on. And let's see, I think I have a few questions that some folks asked. So will we need a quarantine if we've been exposed to COVID, if we've been vaccinated? So OHA did release some kind of preliminary guidelines that say that it's a decreased or eliminated likelihood that you would need to quarantine. So at first they said you do not need a quarantine, but there's a little bit of nuance there, because depending on your type of employment and the nature of exposure, that might be a little bit more nuanced. Jill, feel free to jump in if I'm not quite explaining that well, but for the most part, we feel really optimistic that once you're fully vaccinated, 2 weeks past that second dose, needing to do those types of things will be less likely, and you'll be less limited. There's going to be more movement in that. Someone asked, can I drink alcohol after getting a COVID vaccine? Yes, there's nothing to indicate that alcohol would interfere with the vaccine. Maybe you won't feel that great if you're experiencing some side effects and then choose to drink. So I don't know, I'll leave that up to you. And also kind of want to make sure you monitor that with any ibuprofen or Advil you take, and making sure you're following those recommendations as well as we take painkillers. But otherwise don't need to worry about alcohol. And then just to wrap up, so if you do feel excited to get vaccinated, kind of want to help the cause, maybe you want to be kind of a vaccine advocate or champion, I think what's exciting to me is there's a lot of ways to feel like you're part of this movement, and there's a lot of impact from making a decision like this. So choosing to get vaccinated yourself, I think, is a really big part of that, and a big part of our goal to reach herd immunity. So every person counts toward that. Participating in VSafe is something else we recommend, because it really helps the CDC monitor for any health effects after vaccination. Being able to share your personal experience with your coworkers or your friends or your family, I think just helping demystify the experience, help normalize it, show people that it's safe, it's effective, there's nothing to be scared of, just can help increase other people's confidence in getting vaccinated, and helps us kind of achieve that community immunity. Being here right now is a huge step toward this. So thank you all for being here, just kind of learning more about the vaccine. And it helps you be in a role where you can help perhaps answer questions of your friends and family and help kind of spread this information. You can also really flaunt that you've got vaccinated. So we have really fun I got COVID vaccine stickers at our vaccine clinics. So you can post something on social media and share your excitement. It's fun to have something to be excited about. I think we all need it. So it's fun to really feel that excitement. So with that, I think we can kind of jump to questions, but I just want to quickly show you just a few links. If you do want more information as well, we're updating the Deschutes County COVID vaccine page regularly. So that's a great place for information, especially about appointments and eligibility. The Oregon Health Authority's COVID vaccine website is a wealth of information as well, and the CDC. So those, I think, would be kind of the go-to places that I would recommend for folks to go if you're still wanting to do a little bit of research after this. But otherwise, we can open it up for questions.
I'll jump in.
Thank
I have
you
a quick
both,
question.
Sarah and Jill, and that's why it looks like we have some questions here. So go ahead.
I'll just jump in really quick. When will we have more information, or do we know when we'll have more information about vaccine availability for those after the age groups? So maybe those with underlying health conditions, even before the general population. Do we have any information on that?
Yes, there was a 27-member vaccine advisory committee that was made up of experts around vaccines and public health and medicine. And they did come up with some final recommendations for sequencing beyond the age groups. In the next phase, it looks like there will be the 16 to 64 age group with underlying health conditions. And then beyond that, the essential workers. So these would be people that are essential to the infrastructure of our ongoing day-to-day community work or community flow of supply and that kind of thing. And so we're kind of still waiting for the governor to approve what's next, but it looks like it will be those with underlying conditions next.
Thank you. Laura, you had your hand up. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you so much for having this information and sharing it. I actually have 3 questions, but 2 of them are specifically around getting the vaccination. So one of my coworkers actually got it in their leg. I've always heard of vaccinations in the arm. Is there a reason they would, I mean, she wanted it in her leg so her arms wouldn't be impeded by the soreness. Is there any detriment to having it in your leg?
It needs to be into muscle. And so it is, recommended in the arm, but definitely if someone has a preference, it can be given in the thigh.
Okay, great. And then my other question around getting the vaccination is, do vitamins impede any of it? You say not to take ibuprofen or anything beforehand. I just got my blood taken, and for the first time, my doctor's like, don't take vitamin C before you get the blood drawn. And I'd never heard of that. So is any vitamins, should I avoid taking them?
We haven't heard anything like that. No recommendation against vitamins prior to vaccination.
Okay. And then I guess if nobody else has a question, I have one more. And this is more around the herd immunity. So I was reading, and this was early on when the Brazilian strain was coming out, and both in the New York Times and the Washington Post, they had information about Manaus or Manaus. I don't know how to say the town, but they had herd immunity. They were at 80%, and then the strain came from that. So is there any new information about if we do actually develop herd immunity of another strain coming from that?
Oh, that's a good question. Definitely, we know that people that they call those breakthrough cases. So when someone has been vaccinated, but they still get the infection, they have been milder courses, like shorter, less severe courses, definitely less incidence of complications and hospitalizations and those kinds of things. So similar to the flu vaccine in that way. But your question about could a kind of a variant strain come from those breakthrough cases, basically? Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know that. We could do a little research and get back to you on that. Yeah, glad to.
I don't know if Sarah or Jill, if you see, we do have a question in the chat, and it is, how many people would need to be vaccinated to be at 80% immunity?
Oh, I feel like I have to do some rough math, but I know for Deschutes County, I think it's around like 154,000 is kind of the eligible population. So thinking of those who are 16 or older who live in Deschutes County. So 80% of that would be about 120,000. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But that's kind of the number we're going off of.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to note that at the fairgrounds, they can do upwards of 2,000 doses a day. So, there was one week where we had lots of vaccine, and there were over 10,000 doses administered that week. So, if we have vaccine, we can get a lot of people vaccinated pretty quickly.
This isn't a question, but just a comment. I got my first dose at the fairgrounds, and I was really impressed with just the efficiency, just the care and handling of all of us that went through that day and every day. So I really appreciate that service for our county.
Great.
I have a quick question around the V-Safe, because so Thursday will be 2 weeks post-vaccination for my second one. I'm just here because I love to get all the information. Should I still register for this V-Safe and give them what my symptoms were prior, or is it too late?
No, I think I would. Yeah. I think it'll ask you what day did you receive it, and then it'll ask you about your symptoms. So I think, yeah, you could, it would be helpful to still do that.
Perfect. I found it online, so I'll do it
Yeah.
today. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. This has been very informative too. Thanks.
Oh, good, good. Thank you.
Hey,
Yeah,
Gail, real
and
quick question.
for
Uh,
those of you that that want to get vaccinated and haven't, you know, substitutes are definitely eligible at this time. So in case you had a question about that, you are eligible.
Thanks. Joe, you had a question?
Yeah, real quick, is there a definition of efficacy in that just because I've received the vaccine doesn't mean I won't get COVID-19? I can still test positive, so on and so forth. What is the exact, I mean, I may get a little bit sick, but not as sick. Is that considered it's a positive, or I was fell within that 95%? Can you just maybe provide a little bit of clarity in that, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. So the preliminary data suggests high vaccine efficacy, 94.1% in preventing COVID-19 following receipt of 2 doses of Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. So actually preventing infection. So does that answer your
But I could still test positive, even though I'm not necessarily sick. I could still potentially test positive because, like you said, I can still carry it in my nasal cavity.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you could, because if that's the case, we don't know yet if people can be carriers, but because it's a nasal swab, I guess, yeah, there's potential there that you could test positive.
Thank you.
Do we know
Yep.
when those studies may come out about being a carrier or not?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know when we can expect that data. I would venture to say it's probably not too far off, you know, maybe by end of summer.
Yeah. And I know, so we made the point earlier, but just because it's like you yourself, Joseph, just to go back to your earlier question of, you know, what is it actually preventing, or what is it effective doing? So it's really about preventing you yourself from getting sick, getting kind of that full-blown COVID infection. But because we don't know about transmission, we're still like really trying to still be vigilant in the prevention measures, which I know everyone's so excited about getting vaccinated, but that is something that we really are just trying to push until we do get that information, which I'm not sure when, but I know they are actively looking into that now.
And while we're waiting here, just if there's any last questions, I really want to thank both Sarah and Jill for making time for us today and presenting such good information for us. We are recording this information. We will put it on our health and safety website, or the DOT. And then Sarah, would you mind sharing your PowerPoint, and we could have that sitting up there with that? Is that something we could have? And then all those links and information is there that our staff could look at a later time.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And, you know, I want to thank Gail Burton, our school nurse, for making this all happen too. I know, Gail, you probably wanted to be here earlier to introduce these folks and thank them personally, but thank you for arranging it. And again, I just can't thank you two enough for making time for us today.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to both you gals. I really, really appreciate you jumping in. It's been awesome, awesome information.
thanks for having us, and thanks for all the great questions that the group submitted. It really helped us direct the information we were gathering and show that you are all really engaged. So thank you so much.
Well, and while we've paused here, I don't think we had any more questions come up. So I feel like our time is finished here. And I'll just do one more thank you. Really appreciate it.